An earthquake was felt across parts of southeast Michigan, but the Earth wasn't to blame. The United States Geological Survey said a meteor entered Earth's atmosphere near New Haven Tuesday night, January 16th, causing a magnitude 2.0 earthquake. Dashcam and security videos show the space rock streaking across the sky, turning night to day for a few brief moments. NASA describes meteors as pieces of interplanetary material that fall through the atmosphere, where friction makes them melt and leave trails of bright light. When they explode, as this one did, chunks might reach the ground, at which point they're called meteorites. Bill Cook with NASA's Meteoroid Environment Office told the Washington Post the fireball over Michigan was from a small asteroid traveling at about 28,000 miles per hour. Those who saw it were lucky. Cook says a meteor that bright is rare in Michigan. For United News International,
a perfect cone is how many here describe Mount Mayon. Thousands travel to the Luzon region to see the volcano up close. But for the people of Albay, the volcano is more than just a tourist attraction. It is also a source of anxiety. It's been spewing ash and lava for the past week, prompting the mass evacuation of thousands of villagers, such as the family of Romel and Divine Miranda. They're now staying in this evacuation center. Having grown up in a village on the slope of the volcano, they've lost count of how many times they've fled danger. They now consider themselves professional evacuees.
Mahirap din po kasi kung katulad nito maybe
it never gets easy. We leave our livelihood behind, we sleep here, it's uncomfortable, but we know we have to obey. The authorities will forcefully evacuate us anyway.
Just like many places across the country, the province of Albay often bears the brunt of natural disasters. It's facing the Pacific Ocean, so it's prone to typhoons and erupting volcanoes because it lies along the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire. But the province is considered the most prepared when it comes to emergency response.
We always aim for zero casualty. And like what you said, during typhoons we can prepare for it. But for the Mayon, when it erupts, we never know. Looking at the present situation, we still have always to innovate because isn't always the same.
Thousands of Filipinos live below Mount Mayon and depend on agriculture for their livelihood. This village is empty and people are making sure it stays that way until the danger passes.
We strive for zero casualties, even if we have to forcibly extricate people from here. Some of them insist on coming back to look after their crops and their livestock. We worry about that stockpile of ash and lava up there.
This is as far as we can go, just right at the 6-kilometer danger zone. Local officials tell us they have not seen the volcano this restive. The smoke coming out of the bottom part of the volcano is lava that just flowed moments ago. No one died in the last major eruption of Mount Mayon 4 years ago. That does little to appease people here. They doubt whether the preparations will be enough to withstand nature's unbridled fury. Jamela Alendogan, Al Jazeera, Albay Province, Eastern Philippines.
California's largest wildfire in state history, known as the Thomas Fire, is now 100% contained after more than 1 month of work. In addition to causing massive destruction, the fire also contributed to devastating mudslides in the region earlier this week. The Thomas Fire began December 4th outside Ventura as a series of blazes cropped up across Southern California, but it eventually grew to be the largest, burning through around 281,893 acres, or about 213,000 football fields, in or around the Los Padres National Forest. The fire killed at least 2 people, 70-year-old Virginia Pasola of Santa Paula and 32-year-old Corey Iverson, a firefighter from San Diego. Over 1,000 structures were destroyed, including many homes, and an additional 280 were damaged.
Flu season arrived early in the United States, and according to the CDC, it is widespread in 49 states. CDC Deputy Director Ann Schuchat stated addressing this year's influenza has been particularly difficult. For one, the current vaccine isn't working that well against this year's most common strains of the virus. And the flu is hitting almost everywhere at the same time. According to doctors with the CDC, this widespread of an influenza hasn't been seen in 13 years.
At least 8 people have been killed by icy weather paralyzing the south, which crippled transportation and left tens of thousands of customers without power. Almost 1,700 arrivals and departures were canceled by late Wednesday afternoon at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport in Atlanta, which received 2.3 inches of snow Tuesday night and Wednesday. Hundreds of other delays and cancellations were reported at airports in New Orleans, Houston, Charlotte, and North Carolina. The governors of Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and North Carolina all went on to declare states of emergency.
A winter storm that has brought record low temperatures to parts of the southern region in the United States has left at least 4 people dead. The brutally cold weather has also coated roads with ice, snapped power lines, and caused school closings. According to tracking service Flightware.com, Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport has cancelled about 350 flights as of Wednesday afternoon. Georgia, North Carolina, and Louisiana's governors have declared states of emergency because of severe weather conditions.
Mauritius is bracing itself for the arrival of a tropical cyclone that's headed its way. Strong winds, which could produce gusts of up to 120 kilometers per hour, are already being felt from the Category 3 Birgitta. Thousands of residents have flocked to government storm shelters as the island raised its alert. The population should not go into risky areas where there are landslides, accumulations of water, and also areas that are prone to flooding. Many residents fear Birgitta will cause extensive damage when it makes landfall due mid-Thursday morning local time before it goes on to hit its nearest neighbour, Reunion Island. Local vegetable farmers have already reported their fields have been flooded and about 300 households are said to be without electricity. The last cyclone, which hit in 1994, killed 2 people. Our reporter says Mauritians are asked to stay safe. Emergency services are on alert with the closure of the airport and port. Since this morning, Mauritius is somewhat cut off from the world.
The search for survivors of the deadly mudslides in parts of California's Santa Barbara County continued, even as hopes dwindled to find anyone alive. Justin Cooper, a spokesperson for the multi-agency response team, said, "We're still in rescue mode and we still hope to find someone alive, although the chances of that are becoming slim." Cooper said the death toll rose to 20 on Sunday, with 4 people still missing. Sodden hillsides gave way, unleashing a torrent of mud, water, uprooted trees and boulders onto the valley below, and killing people aged 3 to 89.
We've seen modern cities grapple with historic, seemingly never-ending droughts before. That, unfortunately, is nothing new. But the situation now unfolding in Cape Town, South Africa, is something new. A major city, a thriving global tourism destination at that, on the cusp of running dry with no signs of relief in sight. With a 3.7 million some residents in Metro Cape Town, South Africa's oldest and second most populous urban area, Day Zero, the date the city's depleted reservoirs are expected to officially hit empty, is inching forward at an alarming speed. Day Zero was initially calculated to occur on April 29th, and before that, sometime in May. But on January 8th, Mayor Patricia DeLille pushed the date forward to April 22nd. If that date holds, Cape Town will become the first major city on the planet to run out of usable drinking water, and on Earth Day of all days. The 13 starving siblings held captive in a California house were allowed to eat only 1 rationed meal a day and shower just twice a year, a law enforcement with knowledge of the case told NBC News. Those disturbing details emerged just hours before 57-year-old David Allen Turpin and his wife, 49-year-old Louisa Anna Turpin, were expected to make their first court appearance. They faced possible torture and child endangerment charges. Their home in Paris, a city in Riverside County east of Los Angeles, was a veritable prison, where some of the couple's 13 children, ranging in age from 2 to 29 years old, were chained to furniture,
Up to
officials have
30,000
said.
Central Africans fled their homes in Pau region when fighting broke out between 2 armed groups days after Christmas last year. Many have been forced to seek shelter in church compounds such as this one, and they rely on food from non-government organizations.
The food is not enough. How long can we eat this for? It's not enough compared to what we used to eat at home. We want peace to return so that we can go back home.
The journey here was dangerous. MSF officials say they treated at least 13 people injured as they fled the fighting.
The problem today is that it's an unusual conflict, because it's a conflict where people are either injured or killed in the bush. Especially those who could not reach safely in power have probably disappeared in the bush.
But these centers are small and there aren't enough basic supplies to go around.
It's not easy to find soap, food, or even a place to sleep. We feel abandoned. It's difficult to find water, and the children have nothing to eat.
The Central African Republic has been hit by violence since 2013, when mainly Muslim Seleka rebels seized power, triggering reprisals by Christian anti-Balaka militias. And this latest fighting has drifted the country further away from peace. Suhail Damouni, TRT World.
An oil spill from an Iranian oil tanker that sank in the East China Sea is now the size of Paris. The slick covers an area of 39 square miles after almost doubling in size from the start of the week. Chinese authorities said that there were 4 separate slicks that had formed after the Panama Register's Sanchi tanker sank Sunday. The largest oil slick is 19 square miles, it added. It had been burning in the East China Sea for a week following a collision with another vessel. All crew members, 30 from Iran and 2 from Bangladesh, are presumed dead.
The Missile Defense Agency has inked a contract with U.S. defense contractor Raytheon to test multiple radar platforms for the ballistic missile defense system. Raytheon will be tasked with testing the radar technology and corresponding sensors, as well as conducting simulations for the ballistic missile defense system. The ballistic missile defense system is part of the U.S.'s National Missile Defense Strategy and is designed to protect the country against short to intermediate range ballistic missiles. The deal, announced by the Department of Defense on January 12th, runs through 2023 and has the potential to be worth as much as $641 million. The move comes as tensions across the globe heat up, with more and more countries looking to bolster their military presence and improve or establish intercontinental ballistic missile defense systems. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
Russia has spoken out against the summit hosted by the United States and Canada, which takes place this week in Vancouver. The meeting will bring together 20 nations that backed South Korea during the 1950-53 Korean War to consider tougher sanctions to press against North Korea in the hopes that the nation will give up their nuclear weapons. The Russian Foreign Ministry said top diplomats from Moscow and Beijing had not been invited to attend the meeting and that the events were damaging the authority of the United Nations. The Russian ministry said in a statement that the effort to increase international pressure on North Korea outside of the United Nations was making the situation worse. North and South Korea began talks last week for the first time in more than 2 years.
Saudi Arabia has given Yemen a massive bailout. Saudi Arabia's King Salman transferred $2 billion to Yemen's central bank on January 17th to save Yemen's currency, the rial, from collapsing. Yemeni Prime Minister Ahmed Abed bin Dakar had written a letter to Salman a day earlier pleading for help. The Associated Press reports Dakar wrote saving the rial would amount to, quote, saving Yemenis from inevitable starvation. Yemen has been embroiled in a bloody civil war against the Houthi rebel group for almost 3 years now. Saudi Arabia has been providing military support for the internationally recognized government. The war has led to mass food shortages and caused the Yemeni rial to lose half its value to the U.S. dollar since March 2015. The war and the subsequent economic collapse have also contributed to a cholera outbreak that has killed more than 2,200 Yemenis since last April. For United News International, I'm Vivian.
All flights to and from Amsterdam's Schiphol airport were suspended on Thursday due to a severe storm. The hub, one of Europe's busiest, saw 260 planes grounded amid wind gusts of 140 kilometres per hour. Schiphol later resumed some flights, but the temporary halt caused chaos. Dutch police said 3 people were killed on Thursday by falling trees or debris in separate incidents. Another person died in Belgium. Along the coast in Rotterdam, shipping containers were toppled and entire roofs ripped off homes. Rail services were also stopped in Germany's Ruhr region as the storm moved inland.
Schools in New Orleans, Charlotte, and Atlanta and across the region canceled classes on Thursday. Wind chill advisories from the National Weather Service are in effect as temperatures will feel like they've fallen below 0 Fahrenheit in parts of the Carolinas, Alabama, and Virginia. More than 14,000 households and businesses in various parts of the South were without power early on Thursday. More than 9 inches of snow has fallen in Durham, North Carolina since Monday. The storm has caused at least 8 deaths, mainly due to car crashes and hypothermia. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper said in a statement, "We cannot stress it enough for everyone to stay off the roads unless you have no choice." He added that the storm has already caused 1,600 traffic accidents.
On Wednesday, CNN reported that Sweden is preparing to issue leaflets to 4.7 million households this spring amid growing fears that the country could be dragged into a war. The leaflets urged citizens to prepare for crisis and catastrophes in peacetime, but also for different kinds of attacks on society and Sweden. It's the latest step in the country's revamped defense strategy in response to perceived Russian aggression. The aim to educate Swedes on how to prepare in case their world gets turned upside down.
Protect and defend.
There was no comparison. Donald Trump had his day.
So help me God.
And the very next one, women had theirs. In Washington, D.C., the largest protest in the history of the country. Women across America and the world marched to reject the president, his sexist actions, comments, and past allegations of sexual assault. He was even caught on tape bragging about it.
Grab him by the
And he was still elected. The question at the time, was this a moment or a movement?
I never thought that I would do this until I went to the Women's March in Washington, D.C. Let's let this be the beginning.
Empowered, women like Rebecca Kolaw ran for elected office. In Virginia, a record number ran. 11 toppled long-serving male politicians. It's been happening across the country.
And can I just say to Donald Trump, keep your hands off Seattle.
Women are running like never before and winning, in large part because women are also voting in huge numbers because of Trump.
The worst could possibly happen actually happened, and we have someone unqualified to be leading this country.
Longtime feminist icon Gloria Steinem is in a unique position to judge this movement. She told me she believes it is here to stay.
It's beginning to shift. And I think we're beginning to see that there is no gender. People are people, you know, and beyond race and beyond gender. We're just getting a glimpse.
A system that political scientist Laura Brown says will change because of this. She predicts women will have parity in government in a decade or so.
What you see here is that enough women are finally getting involved at the local and state level to ensure that there will be a strong bench of women candidates ready to run for those higher level offices in the coming years and decades.
1 year in, and it appears there is something Donald Trump is making great again. Feminism, although it is highly unlikely that was his intention. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
Most Somalis are finding it hard just to survive day to day after more than 4 years of drought and the continuing war with al-Shabaab fighters. The UN says it just managed to stave off famine in Somalia last year. But with poor rains forecast again this year, more intensive aid will be needed to help the 1 in every 2 Somalis who are displaced by widespread fighting.
All together over the years, more than 2 million
a fifth of the population. 1 in 2 Somalis is displaced away from their home. This is fueling suffering. It is fueling the levels of humanitarian need, and they do not have livelihoods and other ways to survive.
For more than a decade, al-Shabaab fighters who are linked to al-Qaeda have been trying to take over Somalia. Bombings in the capital, Mogadishu, and conflict nationwide makes it hard for aid groups to introduce projects that will help the economy grow long-term and reduce dependence on aid.
Our work has to be a long-term work on how to help Somalia stand on its feet, support the Somali people so that we are not in the same circle every year, responding to crisis.
The threat from al-Shabaab gunmen remains significant despite being forced from much of the territory they controlled by forces from the Somali army and the African Union. Reduced funding means 21,000 AU troops are due to leave Somalia by the end of 2020. Somali government leaders say they don't have the resources to plug the gap those troops will leave. That risks more instability, and rather than aid groups helping Somalia become self-sufficient, aid workers are struggling to keep the population from starving to death. Bernard Smith, Al Jazeera.
After a 28,000-mile journey, the U.S. Navy's recently upgraded amphibious warship, the USS Wasp, has arrived at its new home port in Japan. The Wasp arrived in Japan on January 14th, completing a journey from Norfolk, Virginia that began in late August and included nearly 2 months of humanitarian relief efforts following 2 hurricanes in the Caribbean. The Wasp replaces the USS Bonhomme Richard, which has been forward deployed to Japan since April 2012. The Wasp, which was commissioned back in 1989, recently underwent significant upgrades to be able to land and launch the Marine Corps' F-35B Joint Strike Fighter. 16 F-35Bs from the Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 121 will ship out on the Wasp later this year for a scheduled patrol, marking the aircraft's first deployment at sea. For United News International, I'm Whit Mooney.
While South Korea and North Korea discuss the Olympics, a group of 20 nations agreed to consider further sanctions to bring the northern regime to the negotiating table on denuclearization. Representatives from 20 countries met in Vancouver, British Columbia on January 16th for a summit hosted by the United States and Canada. China and Russia were not invited to the talks. Summit participants agreed to strictly enforce current sanctions and agreed to consider unilateral sanctions beyond those imposed by the United Nations. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said sanctions pressured North Korea into talks with the South regarding participation in the upcoming Winter Olympics. Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono echoed this sentiment and said now is not the time to ease up. Tillerson also said North Korea will trigger a military response from the United States if they refuse to negotiate. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
According to the UN agency tasked with assisting Palestinian refugees, the Trump administration's decision to cut funds to the organization has sparked its largest ever financial crisis. The decision drew a wide range of reaction. Condemnation came from Palestinians, praise from Israel, and expressions of deep concern were expressed by UN officials and refugee groups. 2 weeks ago, U.S. President Donald Trump raised the prospect of cutting U.S. aid to Palestinians in a series of tweets. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency will launch a global fundraising campaign to fill in budget gaps left behind by the U.S. administration's decision to withhold $65 million. The amount represents roughly half of the amount it was due to receive from the U.S. this month.
Japan's newest railway station master is named Nitama. She beat fierce competition for the prestigious position, rising through the ranks due to her qualified resume, including a previous role as the station master at Itakiso Station and an assistantship under the former station master at Kishi in the rural district of Kinokawa. She's also a cat. She's not the first cat to serve as a station master in Japan, far from it. In fact, she's only where she is today due to her groundbreaking predecessor, Japan's most famous cat station master, Tama. Tama passed away in June at the ripe old age of 16, or about 80 in cat years, and Tama was appointed after the traditional 50-day mourning period of the Japanese Shinto religion.